Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Welcome to the WP Builds podcast. You have reached episode number 299, entitled When the Client Turns Web Designer, in brackets, although we hardly talk about that. It was published on Thursday, the 13th of October, 2022. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and in a few short minutes I'll be joined by my good friend David Wormsley so that we can chat about the subject in hand. But before then, a couple of bits of housekeeping. The first thing to mention is that our Black Friday page is up and running. We do this every single year, and typically we get hundreds of deals sent to us by WordPress businesses. So that could be themes, plugins, blocks, hosting, all sorts of things. And we curate them into a searchable, filterable list so that it means that you've got one stop during the Black Friday madness. It kind of extends a bit further these days. It goes into Halloween before Black Friday, and then Black Friday itself, and then Cyber Monday. The page is at the easiest to remember URL. It's wpbuilds.com/black. One more time, wpbuilds.com/black. If you want to submit your deal, go to that page and click the big blue button and you can add your deal. It's completely free to do that. And there are several sponsor slots right at the top of that page. And if you're interested in getting your product or service seen right away on that page, then go to the page, and in the sponsors area at the top, there are some yellow buttons and you can find out more. We'd love to have you on. So that's wpbuilds.com/black. Bookmark that for the upcoming madness of Black Friday. The only other thing to mention is wpbuilds.com/subscribe. Over at that page, you'll be able to join us on all of our channels. We've got our YouTube channel, Twitter, which is at WPBuilds, and various other places. Plus, there's a couple of newsletters you can sign up to, and if you do that, we'll let you know when we produce new content. Typically, that's on a Thursday. That's the podcast you're listening to now. And we also do our This Week in WordPress show. We do that live every Monday, and then it's put out as a podcast episode on a Tuesday. So we'll let you know about that as well. If you want to join us live, it's 2 p.m. like I said, every Monday. You can go to wpbuilds.com/live, and we love it when people join the conversation over there. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. You can find out more by going to go.me/WPBuilds. And we sincerely thank GoDaddy Pro for their continued support of the WP Builds podcast. Okay, so this episode, well, it's a bit of tongue-in-cheek. It's entitled When the Client Turns Web Designer, and then in brackets, although we hardly talk about that. The intention very much was to talk about the new direction of WordPress, the fact that it's got basically a page builder in Gutenberg. If you look at the way that WordPress is positioning itself, phrases like build simply, design without a designer, if you go to wordpress.org, you can find those phrases. Perhaps we are in the era of non-technical users being able to do everything they want to do without the need for third-party page builders and so on and so forth. So the pretense was to talk about that, but then we went down this rabbit hole about Jamstack and various other bits and pieces which are related but somewhat tangential. It's a fun conversation. I always love chatting to David. If you've got any commentary, please leave it at the bottom of the post. Search for 299 at wpbuilds.com, or you can go to our Facebook group and leave us a comment there. I hope that you enjoy it.
Welcome to another in the Business Bootcamp series, where we relearn everything we know about building WordPress sites and running a web design business from start to finish. We're at the end of season 4, which is a short season looking at training clients. And today we are talking about when the client turns web designer. Nathan and I are taking contrasting approaches to getting our new businesses running and our first client site built. She's a new lawyer with no previous site. And Nathan, we rambled on for so long before we press record on this one. So
Yes.
We could go off in many different directions.
I think we probably will ramble on again, but this episode kind of fits the bill perfectly because we have this new client. We really don't know what her level of involvement is going to be. I would assume, being a lawyer, that she, Miss A, is going to be incredibly busy lawyering. So I would imagine there's not much scope in her calendar to get into web design. But depending on which client you end up with, it may be that they want to get really involved. And so you've got this, you've got this dichotomy. How much do you pull them in and explain how everything works and let them go to town designing things for themselves? Or how much do you lock them out and make sure that they don't touch anything and ruin anything?
Yeah, and as we're rethinking, I mean, when we started, partly people came to us because we had these HTML, CSS skills that they didn't have. And now, and particularly in WordPress, we're moving much more forward to the idea of the code-free solution that people can adopt to do it themselves. And we'll talk about this a little bit more because how that's kind of highlighted. So yeah, we again have to question what type of business that we are doing. Are we somebody who says, look, this is just our tools that we use and client you can kind of keep out? Or do we, as some people have, almost built businesses on building the site for people and then ongoingly teaching them to do everything that they might need to do with the software that they've provided for them?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I kind of think that the truly things like page builders, for people like you and I, because we've been in there so many times, it really is instinctive. You know where everything is and you can make the modifications that are suggested almost with your eyes closed. You know where everything needs to be and all of that. But I still think even with page builders, there's still a bit of a disconnect between how it works and how easy it is. So despite the fact that the client doesn't need to know CSS, doesn't need to know JavaScript, doesn't need to know HTML, any of that, I still think for many people, the void between it being practically easy for them and the level of skill that you and I have both developed with our page builder of choice is wide enough a chasm that they're not going to want to play with it. Certainly that was my experience. They kind of implied that, oh, that's great, look how easy it is, and yet the phone still rang with, would you just change the title for me? Because they're just not that invested in it. They really just saw it as a website which it was my job to create, and they're on some sort of maintenance plan, so I fix that for them when they want it fixing. So easy for us to use, but potentially not as easy for clients to use as we would like to believe.
Yeah, and most page builder advertising who do that very well are very good at selling the idea that you can just drag and drop your way there, but performance and responsivity and different browser support is all stuff that is kind of baked into us. We know we're thinking that while we're making changes, where a client would be completely unaware that changes they've made could be actually giving their users a poor experience.
Yeah.
So I've done an about turn completely on this, and this is why this whole series has been interesting for me. Just talking about these things from beginning to end has just got me feeling that I was doing a lot of stuff wrong, and much of it was about, and particularly with the page builders, it was a selling point for them that they could go in and do so much more. And I was much more for the idea of encouraging that as something. I'd build the site with them and then train them as much as they wanted to take on in order to be as self-sufficient as they felt they needed to be. And I've had to roll that back completely.
Why was that? Was there some sort of moment in time where it became obvious that was a poor decision?
Yeah, I think more recently, and it is a result of people coming into organizations where I've built the site. So the original relationship and the agreements are not there, and somebody else has come in with their expectation. And I think this is where, because of this kind of code-free movement that we've got going through, they come in. But it could have been true of WordPress anyway. So recently, somebody who's now taken over the role of looking after the website literally came to me about a custom site, which is quite complex, and said, could we change out the WordPress theme to make it something more modern? From her understanding of WordPress, that's all that needed to be done. In fact, not not at all the case. It was impossible to be done. And I think, you know, I'm seeing more of that. I'm seeing because, again, somebody else has took over, went in and changed much of their site, never thinking that they could be doing damage. I think their perception of the web and where it might be is that if they've got a login to somewhere and there's some tools there, that's all they need to know. It should be simple.
So they had understood that WordPress was a theme-based CMS, and therefore they were deploying the word theme as in, you know, can we just change the theme and that will solve our problems? You know, we'll just get a new modern theme or whatever it was. And it was as simple as clicking a button, downloading something, and everything would be okay. There was no thought that there was granular work to be done and things needed to be changed on a page-by-page basis or whatever. So, okay.
Yeah, I think they viewed it as, I mean, I've no real experience of Wix and that, but that kind of sells itself on you. Really, you've got a template and there's a limit to what you can do with that template. So I think they felt they were probably safe to go into WordPress because I think it's kind of, for some people, that's what it is. And it's not for us.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's, for me, that's made me roll back. But I was saying to you, wasn't I, the heart of all of this was getting back, rethinking, as we're doing over this one. It's got me back to why I do website builds. And I very much, with the agile thing that I've gone forward, is about this ongoing improvements to the site. So I want something stable that we improve together with the client, how we might be able to achieve their business aims and improve their website over the longer period.
Yeah, so it wasn't really a case of things calamitously, you know, catastrophic errors being made by clients who you'd let loose inside the page builder. It was more that you've thought that, okay, there's a possibility for that, and wouldn't it be better if I was in control of this from the start? So yeah, there's a couple of things there. Firstly, that is quite a big change around, isn't it? Because for a lot of this series, we've been talking about that from a different perspective, where you were encouraging people to do that, and you've had a shift, which is kind of cool when you come to those realizations. It's kind of nice within your own business to realize, actually, do you know what? It's okay for me to change what I do because it's my business. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, I wonder how much of this sort of stuff is a product of the way WordPress has slowly over time, certainly more recently, begun to pivot itself, not as a, you know, coded solution for building a WordPress, you know, come along and enjoy the code and create websites. Now it's more like, come along, click buttons, and you'll have a website without any code or experience whatsoever.
Yeah. We were taking a look at WordPress.com and .org, and it's had a redesign, hasn't it, for .org? And
it really has. It's a significantly different page. You drew some interesting conclusions. There was a couple of things that you noticed on that page, though, weren't there?
There was particularly one of the slogans of WordPress has been "Code is poetry," and we notice it's now in the footer and very much faded out, and instead it's very much about dream it and build it. And it's the same with, if we go over to WordPress.com, which is effectively the same set of tools. We've got, actually, what are the lines? I've forgotten what they are. They actually...
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm logged into WordPress at the minute, so if I go to WordPress.com, I can't actually see it. But it was something like build simply?
Yeah, build simply.
Design without a designer, something like that.
Design without a designer is in there. So yeah, that's very much on that one. It's so you can see there's a move towards the code free. That's the mission, and that does have an impact, I think, on the perception of WordPress, and we can either go with it or kind of go against it. Can I say something just about, because in some way I may be miscommunicated, because you say I may be reverted on what I was saying earlier. I'm still very much with the agile of the client being involved in the design. So we work through how that might get designed together. What I want to stop is this. There seems, if I'm going to have a ongoing relationship with them, there's no real need for them to go in and do things which I'd be better at doing, because we've got this long-term relationship. So in some ways, I've not reverted on my agile approach. It's part of it. But what I have done is, when I was project-based, I used to think it was a selling thing. I'll build them the site, I charge them for that, and then you've got this wonderful tool here where you can go and do it for yourself. Isn't that great? And now I'm thinking, actually, you make a lot of mistakes if you go into that tool, and what's the point? I'm going to stick around. Let me just do that.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
that's the
So
change.
yeah. So it's not quite as seismic as I'd implied. Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
No.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So do we think that WordPress.com, WordPress.org is pivoting to the point where people are assuming it's like a Wix and a Squarespace, and so you can come along and everything's dead simple? Because I'm not sure that WordPress.com or .org is at that point yet. I don't think in terms of simplicity and ease of use, I don't think it can make that pitch yet, although it certainly seems to be.
Yeah. You made a really good point to me earlier, and it's something which Matt Mullenweg has stated publicly a couple of times in his kind of addresses just recently, in fact. And that was about the audience for WordPress.com.
Yeah, so my understanding, and you never know, the data might be out of place now, is that WordPress.com, despite the fact that I view WordPress as a website building tool, so let's just be clear, a website, you know, headers, footers, pages, posts, archives, all of that, and you can make it look however you like. It would appear that a significant amount of people are using it still as a tool for creating posts. So if you like, a blogging platform. And we both know that WordPress has been trying to shed that idea that that's all it's useful for, blogging. You know, we've got custom post types and fields and all of that kind of stuff. You can do anything with WordPress, let's be clear on that. But it would appear that a significant proportion, possibly even the majority of people on .com, and I don't know about on .org, are still just keen to throw a theme on there and create content on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and have that, you know, index in an RSS feed and put on search engine pages and all of that. And that's what they want. They just want a method of creating posts, and the whole website piece isn't really what they want. They don't want a brochure with, you know, brochure site with an About Us page and a contact form. They just want a way of throwing out their content into the world.
And it kind of shows you who they attract, because I wouldn't have thought, you know, that I think they quote it's over 50% who are using it essentially for blogging on WordPress.com. I wouldn't have thought of all the people who needed to publish online that bloggers were anything close to that, you know, 20% at best. So I should think, you know, WordPress hasn't shed its in the wider public its name as a blogging platform, or the blogging platform.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating to me, because I really don't view it as a blogging platform anymore. I really do view it as a tool to create websites. And so for me, working with clients, it was all about the pages, you know, creating the about. So honestly, I was in the add new page section 10 times more than I was in posts. In fact, to the point where I think the majority of my clients, you know, there's a blog, it's in there, that comes free, it's there for the ride, you can't really strip it out of WordPress, but they weren't making use of it. So it's absolutely fascinating. I just didn't see it as that kind of a tool. But it does give you an indication maybe of why things like themes have stuck around for so long, and why it's difficult for WordPress to transfer over to something that's not a blogging platform. So, you know, the friction that Gutenberg has created in the space, and also things like full site editing, seems that most people don't really need to make use of that. The theme was enough. They just need something which looks pretty and works. They click a button, headers and footers are taken care of by the theme. They just click publish on the post. And if that's what most people are using it for, I can kind of better understand why the Gutenberg and full site editing piece has been so difficult to transition.
Yeah. And I think, you know, even before we knew the name Gutenberg, you know, Matt, in one of the State of the Words going back maybe 6-7 years ago or more, was highlighting the growth in things like Wix. So accommodating that demand for build it yourself, and very much it's, even if it hasn't achieved it yet, it's taken that approach. And that's a bit of a threat to what we do, because it's essentially a message that's saying you don't need us. Unless you, and we were talking about this earlier, I mean, you know, do you highlight to compensate that? Do you go from a more visual design and say, that's what I supply, and you can't get that? You can't get something custom, and that it doesn't matter the tool that we use. WordPress is just my choice. It could be any. You've really brought me in for this beautiful design. Or are you a marketer, again, where you don't, the platform neutral to a certain degree? It's really about the process and how you reach people, and you use the website as a tool in that marketing. Both of those people escape, don't they? This kind of where the platform's going, it doesn't matter so much. To us, it does a bit more.
For me, it was ever since the advent of page builders, that was a real godsend, because, as I said, I was creating pages more than posts.
Yes.
And I know that, things like Beaver Builder came out with Thema so that you could do archives and all of that incredible stuff that ended up being possible. But it was really just a tool for me being able to create pages more quickly, and without the hassle of getting an IDE open. I could do things more quickly by clicking buttons on the screen, and templates that I'd saved previously I could reuse, and so on. And that was all that I wanted WordPress to be. I think I still kind of in my head, I still don't see it really as a blogging platform, even though that's what most people are using it for. And so when I was pitching to people like Madame A, it really was, okay, we can create, I'll do you a 5-page website for this amount of money. And then the conversation very rarely arose as to, well, can I create regular posts and put out a blog? It just basically never came up. I used to add it as a bit of an add-on, which seems like a bit of a cheap way of doing it, but this is what I used to do. I used to add in the fact that there was a blogging functionality was built in. I basically would say I'd build you a website, and also, for free, along comes a blogging platform. And, it was a line item. Nobody ever, I think, made any use of it particularly.
There is a bit, and this is a challenge because I've gone this way. So I'm going to preface this with a bit of my history. So, 2007, I adopted WordPress. I started with HTML and CSS, and I got it because it got all these plugins and I could do stuff. And I built an intranet and an e-commerce shop. Wow, it was just amazing that I could do that as a non-programmer. You move to page builders, suddenly I can speed up my work and give clients an even better experience to update their stuff. Wonderful.
Yep.
Now we're moving along, and I look at my workload, and this will be true of Miss A, and we say, okay, probably for the foreseeable, she's just going to have what is in effect a HTML, CSS site. Now we've got all this baggage of this LAMP stack that we have to maintain and support and have a server for. And we have all the updates that need to be done to all the plugins that have allowed us to build this site very quickly and offer this. Is that the way forward? And I've been questioning this a little bit for certain types of work. So I would be saying, well, there's a challenge to WordPress, or at least all of those kind of CMSs, not just WordPress. And that's the kind of Jamstack approach. And I think that's really caught my interest recently. I didn't understand it initially, but it really gets back to the idea of, if it is just HTML, serve up HTML and serve them up to a global CDN. No need for a server. Do it that way.
Okay, a couple of things from that. Firstly, you'll have to explain what a Jamstack is, I think.
Yes, I will, won't I? So Jamstack, it's really a difficult term. There was a kind of movement, if you like, and then it had to be given a name, and Jamstack was it, and it stands for JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And effectively, it's not even a stack, because it's the idea that as the web has developed, browsers have really come on, CSS has come on, but JavaScript particularly, because of the ability now to, if you like, combine it with a programming language. So it can now do your dynamic stuff without needing something like PHP running on the server. So there's been this kind of movement, if you like, that's challenged against it. But from my side of it, when I look at the HTML site initially, I think, well, I could build that, and I could directly make it on VS Code, a free tool, build the HTML back as it was, put that to GitHub. It works as a backup, version control, send it out to a CDN, which means I probably won't even need to pay for my hosting. With something like Netlify. Why do I not do that? The big thing was, going back to the reason I came into WordPress was all of this dynamic stuff. And you go, well, now that dynamic stuff can be done in the the browser itself with JavaScript, and I could pull somebody in to come and put that stuff in for me.
Okay, so Right, let's just unpick this a little bit, because there's quite a transformation occurring here, isn't there? We're talking about stripping out WordPress altogether and using something entirely different, this Jamstack that you've just described. So first thing, what would be the criteria? Let's say that Miss A comes to you and says, let's take two scenarios. In the first scenario, she wants a website which has got 5 pages, and they're basically never going to change. It's just a simple brochure site. Possibly there's a contact form on there, but that's about it. It's dead simple. So that's scenario number 1. In scenario number 2, she wants, she wants a blog. She wants to be able to update it quickly herself. She wants to be able to have the capacity to throw in, a booking system, and possibly to sell some products online and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm trying to say here is I'm giving you 2 different options. Do they both fit in your Jamstack model, or are you going to WordPress for one of those and not for the other?
I think you could go my skill level, which is what brought me into WordPress in the first place. I'm no good at I'm not a programmer. I can't do the dynamic stuff. So I've got 2 options. If somebody's coming with a client where they might need a lot of stuff, I'm probably at this point definitely going to start and make my sole thing WordPress. But it isn't really one versus the other, because another way of looking at WordPress is that it is now an API. Through the REST API, you can use it to put in your data, your fields, and as we've seen with the headless movement, you can then output that to a Jamstack anyway. So it isn't one or the other, but for me, it sort of would be, and Jamstack does allow this option to say, okay, I don't need necessarily to run with all the plugins and that's something like 1 million lines of code and then my HTML on top of it. I can just simply serve up the HTML. But because it's component based, I could bring in what I needed, including WordPress if it needed some major data solution as well, some way to be able to put that kind of stuff in. So I just think it's a really interesting challenge, and certainly one that's recently been making me think about the kind of future and what you might offer a client like Miss A.
Okay, so everything's possible. You've got the REST API. You can do almost anything if you've got the technical expertise and time to figure all that stuff out. What about the piece, though, where she says she wants to edit it herself?
Okay, yeah. Well, again, this is the thing about it. You go back to the HTML, and now there are a range of CMS choices. Some of them may be very, very simple. So the people who coined the phrase Jamstack are Netlify people, and they have a little simple CMS that you can just plug in. So you put a little line in the code and say, make this editable in your HTML, and then you go into your Netlify account and you set up something so client can go in and they can change this field. So effectively, you could add in the CMS which is appropriate to the job as it's needed. I'm really selling Jamstack here, aren't I?
Well, no, I think it's quite interesting because obviously your eyes have been diverted by that. I wonder, for me, I'm probably not going to go down that route just because of the additional complexity. And also, I kind of, I'm embedded in the WordPress community. I love all that sort of stuff. And I love all of the simplicity. And I think that you're going to be spending a lot of time exploring all of that, and it'll be really exciting. I'm yet to be convinced, because I haven't spent the amount of time that you have, as to whether or not the technical requirements of all of that is just a little bit too much for me at this point. Whether I can be bothered to put the time into it, and whether or not it's going to would it give me a return on all of that time, and so on and so forth. But it sounds like you're really into it in given certain scenarios.
Yeah, I think, there might be some cases where it's useful to have that extra extra string to your bow. And I think, that for me at this moment, it's like I've only done solely WordPress. And I just think, do you know what? The circumstances where a simple HTML site, the amount of work sometimes you have to do to make sure the performance is right, add in on top of that a CDN, which can create its own problems where you could send it directly. There's a lot of solutions to problems that we have in WordPress when the site is simple,
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of complexities, as you point out, about going down that route. It's really not for somebody who doesn't want to go back to that HTML and CSS. But if you do, what ultimate control you have, particularly if I was going an agile approach, it means that I add in only what is needed. And I think that's the philosophy around the Jamstack. It's to get back to what has always been the case, why HTML isn't a programming language, is because of the principles of keep it simple, stupid, you know? But it defines everything, doesn't it, for the web? If you don't keep things stupid, people make it more complex than it needs to be. And somewhere along the line, there's a problem to that. So if you only need to serve HTML, that's what you should serve. And in some ways, that's the counter to the WordPress argument. You know, you could argue that's got overly complex in what you need to maintain. But as I say, it's not either one or the other, really, I don't think, with this one. It's an option for some sites if you've got the skills. It also doesn't... There's no way there's going to be an easy route like you've got with WordPress to be able to shove in some extra dynamic stuff.
Do you see a point in your future then where WordPress is literally no longer part of your your weapons of choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that could happen, but I think it will just I mean, I think it's interesting to look at this. And rather than just a challenge, but as another option to look at, because I think the debates in it are quite interesting. And, you know, I think having that sort of wider overview, because I've been very much, absolutely, it's been WordPress all the way since 2007.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm turning away from it.
I was going to say, I'm going to need to get a new co-host, David. What the heck?
Yeah, exactly. I'm off. I'm going to Jamstack.
That's right. We'll have to do the Jam Builds podcast or something like that.
No, I just think it's an interesting challenge and one that I misunderstood. And I don't think it's one that is excluded from WordPress. You know, WordPress is a very complex CMS that a lot of people know and love, and they can use it, as we are seeing more with a lot of the headless stuff. And I think Automattic are actually funding some of the stuff that's looking into that. So it isn't one or the other. But in terms of me looking at a client like Miss A, and if I'm going the agile where I go step by step, I kind of want a stable base, a HTML base, which I understand and can control, which I can't necessarily if it's coming through a plugin, which is making its own decision and having to serve new clients who want different things to me. So, you know, there it certainly is a way that I should look at.
Just go back, because I'm not sure that we kind of drilled down. I don't know how we've ended up talking about Jamstack when this is supposed to be all about clients things. But I'm fascinated, so let's keep going. What's the kernel of why you're exploring all of this? Is it speed? Is it's cheaper? Is it better in terms of resources? What's the deal?
Here was the deal. What got me? I guess the agile thing, getting back to that idea that what I'm interested in is what the web could do for people, and I want this long-term relationship, so this ongoing add-in to it, and that coupled with great changes in, so to a certain degree, we're all having to rethink our stack because of Gutenberg. Do we jump on it? Do we work against it? And I've just thought, well, I don't actually know.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is think, well, I don't know. I will go back and just get to some of the basics, because I realized page builders have made me very lazy with one of the skills that I had, which was a bit of CSS and HTML. So I revisited it, and in revisiting it, it kind of led me to VS Code, which led me to a tool called Astro, which allows you to kind of template, and it's a Jamstack type approach to template your HTML, which is always a problem if you try to do it manually. So I've kind of gone a strange route, just trying to up my skills a little bit. So
right, so it was kind of born out of your interest in sort of tinkering, and something caught your eye about it. For me, it seems like on the flip side of it, you've gained a whole load of new skills, but also websites will be quicker. You'll probably make yourself more bulletproof in the future, because you'll have a whole new suite of tools that you can use and ways of deploying websites, which I think will be faster, leaner, probably better for the environment and so on. Plus, you don't need the heft of something like WordPress, which, like you said, is 1 million+ lines of code in the background. Yeah, it's fascinating and a bit left field. I wasn't anticipating this.
No, we have gone off from that. But I think it's still very much, when you look at the conversation, I've been looking at this recently, where I think when I first came into WordPress, developers were very much the commentators. They were the influencers, and it was very much featured around skills. And so I always felt I didn't have the skills. So I was always trying to do that. And that's still, I've dropped that a little bit. And now it's moved a little bit more to talking about the products, buying which product are you going to use, which plugin are you going to do to solve that problem.
Yeah.
And that's been a shift. Now, one thing that sort of crossed my mind as we move, as we feel we almost need to be moving from platform to platform all the time, it makes me think, well, if I look back on my history here, when I started, if a page builder had been built at that time, it would have been tables based.
Yep.
And it would be dead today.
Yep.
Because it would have committed to that. And then it would have moved to floats and it would be dead today. And then it would have moved to Flexbox, where most of them are now, and now is presently getting challenged by the grid, the CSS grid. So I think sometimes, this aim for code free is effectively locking you into the length of that platform. So I've had to think about that's actually appropriate in a lot of cases. A client want, agile, get something out there quickly, build it with a page builder. It may only last on that platform for a number of years, but that did the job.
Yeah, I do. I understand. I wonder if the the changes that you've just described, I'm guessing none of that will ever slow down. Technology's not gonna go at a snail's pace. There's always going to be a new thing to think about, and maybe stripping WordPress out of that enables you to pivot to that a little bit more successfully. I'm going to be interested to see how this goes down with clients. I'm kind of guessing that certainly in my scenario, every website that I built, the clients had no interest in the technology behind it. WordPress was about as much as they could cope with. If you then started talking about, you need a server and we've got to set up MySQL and a database and, then we've got to find somewhere to put all the files. And, of course, we've got to have something like Nginx running. Nobody was interested in that. They just wanted to know, listen, can I have a website? Will you manage it for me? And at the very most, will I be able to edit it? Which basically nobody ever did. They always picked up the phone. So I think in a curious way, this isn't going to be something you're going to be talking about with Miss A anyway. She's just going to say, can you build the site and where is it? If we'd have been 6 months ago when you were talking about working with the clients much more and letting them understand how the page builder works and allowing them to be a web designer in effect to some limited extent, then that would have been troublesome. But now with your new approach, without cutting WordPress out of the picture, so long as you can deliver the website, I don't suppose Miss A will care at all.
No, and it's going to be an experiment. Next thing I'll do is with that and see how that kind of works out, just as an approach, just to keep my skills there. I mean, it's always useful to keep having those skills. But it does make me wonder a little bit about Gutenberg. Will it, as it goes towards being a page builder, will it effectively, be the start of its own demise because it will lock too much into a system, which effectively code is always changing, browsers are always changing, CSS spec is always changing. Will it ever effectively make itself out of date through not being able to evolve?
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole premise of Gutenberg isn't to be locked inside a WordPress, is it? Matt has this idea that Matt Mullenweg has this idea that it'll kind of like become the how to describe it, the interface for the internet. So it won't just be on WordPress, it'll be on, I guess a good quick example would be something like Tumblr, because that's a property owned by Automattic, so they can just push it into there. But it'll also be on Drupal. It may also be built inside of your mobile phone. Now, I can't see any of that happening just yet, but that would be the principle. And if that's the case, then maybe Gutenberg is a good bet. But also the whole block methodology, the fact that the blocks are just little atomic bits of content and even to some extent little mini applications. They can do so much more than the classic editor ever could. You can have a block which will, render real estate listings. It's got all the fields bound to it and so on. I think that Gutenberg is going to be quite interesting in the future, and obviously in your new approach where you got the Jamstack, I don't know how that'll fit in, but I think Gutenberg's got a really bright future, but we just can't see it yet because we just have the comparison of a page builder, and it doesn't meet that comparison head on very well at the minute. But I don't think that's what it's necessarily trying to be. It's trying to be a lot more than that.
No, and I've just thought while you were talking there that perhaps from Matt's vision of it is because of this being this interface. Largely, it's the design, the system that's there, the code, underlying code that makes it all happen is changeable. And actually, that's, I think, is creating a bit of a frustration for some people who've jumped in on building custom blocks itself, because things like class names change. So for someone like me who like the page builders, because I had a bit of custom CSS I could add into, that's a bit of a nightmare with Gutenberg. But essentially, the fact that it can change like that and you're not supposed to build on top of it in that particular way is the thing that might stop it be stuck.
Yeah.
So we don't know, do we? But it's very interesting, and I just think, and it's completely off our topic, but I think we had to kind of reach to this sort of how things have changed to realize what you're offering to the client. I mean, some people are just literally, that is their business now with WordPress. And they build the sites and help them to use WordPress.
I think this is the episode where we've least tackled the topic at hand. I feel like we've gone off a completely different in a completely different direction. I think we're quite good at staying on message, but I think today we failed miserably. So whether or not this episode will air with the title of "When the Client Turns Web Designer" or not, I don't know. But have we done this? Is there any more that you want to add?
No, we've done it, and it's the end of this season, so we're going to the last season, isn't it? Next, we'll be talking about the after build maintenance, monitoring, hosting, upselling services, etc.
Yeah, and you've just upended all of that. You realise, with your Jamstack, you're gonna have a completely different approach. So so all right, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, enjoyed that. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, I hope that you enjoyed that. Always a pleasure chatting to David. If you listened to the whole episode, you will very much have noticed that we went slightly off topic. The idea was to talk about web designers being made out of ordinary clients, them thinking that they can do everything themselves, which of course, increasingly they can. But then, as you'll have heard, we slightly got derailed and started talking about things like Jamstack, but it was a lovely conversation anyway. If you have any thoughts about what we said today, we'd love to hear them. There's a comment section over at wpbuilds.com. Search for episode number 299 and leave us a comment there. Alternatively, our Facebook group, wpbuilds.com/Facebook. You could go there and leave us a comment. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by GoDaddy Pro. GoDaddy Pro, the home of managed WordPress hosting that includes free domain, SSL, and 24/7 support. Bundle that with The Hub by GoDaddy Pro to unlock more free benefits to manage multiple sites in one place, invoice clients, and get 30% off new purchases. Find out more by going to go.me/WP Builds. And we thank GoDaddy Pro for their continuing support of the WP Builds podcast. Just a quick reminder, if you're into Black Friday deals, don't forget our URL, wpbuilds.com/black. It's a great big list, a growing list. Pretty small at the moment, to be honest, but it'll grow. You watch over the coming days, and you'll be able to search and filter all of your things over there. Get it bookmarked. We will be back next week. As it was a chat with David, it'll be an interview next week. We'll obviously be back on Monday for our This Week in WordPress show. But it remains only for me to say, I'm going to fade in some cheesy music. You stay safe. Bye-bye for now.